Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Gabe Dominicello here, and he is the co-founder of Umbra. And Umbra is in the space tech industry. We're going to talk a lot about space and whatever else comes up. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. You almost got my last name right.
Can you repeat it?
Dominicello.
Dominicello. I'm here in Argentina. I should be getting the Italian pronunciation because there's so many Italians here. So first of all, I have to ask, what is the come and take it? What's the story behind that?
The come and take it? Oh, it's a Texas flag. But actually, the original story was from the Battle of Thermopylae between the Greeks and the Persians. And well, everyone knows the movie The 300. So I don't know if it was in the movie or not, but they said, they said, put down all your arms, blah, blah, blah. And King Leonidas said, come and take them.
Interesting.
And then this also was done at the Alamo. And it's just a great story.
And Leonidas is a company. There's a company called Leonidas, and I imagine it has something to do with that as well, that I just recently learned about, that they're doing EMPs
probably a Greek founder.
Yeah. And they're doing EMPs for drone swarms. That kind of blew my mind as well. Kind of related to space as well. What kind of has kept your attention in terms of space technology in the recent couple weeks?
Well, I mean, obviously the transition. So there's going to be, well, if you believe what the administration is saying, there's going to be a massive change in how things are procured. And for a little background, most aerospace technology, from airplanes to screws to soap dispensers, which Boeing charges $160,000 for, are done through what's called a cost plus contract. So cost plus contracting was originally put into place during World War II when we were at total war. So imagine being at total war and going to Daimler Chrysler and saying, hey, take all of your cars off the line and start building tanks. And they say, what? We don't know what the market is. And they say, okay, no. We're going to give you a contract for, call it $1 billion, and we're going to make sure that you are profitable on that contract. So you take off the cars, you put on tanks, we're going to give you $1 billion, but we'll give you 100 million of that billion in profit. So during World War II, it makes sense because we're in total war. But what has happened over the last, 70 years is they say, wait, if I overrun this contract, I can increase my profit by 1%. So if it's not $1 billion, it's $2 billion. Your profit now suddenly is $200 million. So what the new administration has been talking a lot about is cost minus, which is firm fixed price. So that ignites American ingenuity. It ignites competition. So if you compete against these contracts where it's like, wait, you saw that SpaceX, where the government was spending an incredibly large amount of money on launch through these cost plus mechanisms. Elon goes, I'll do it myself, and then you buy it as a service. So that brought launch costs down from $1 billion to 100 million. And now, of course, launch costs are significantly lower, even in the last decade, where I think when we were looking at launching our first satellite, the launch cost was $5 million. Our last satellite launched for probably was in the $1 million ESPA rideshare, which is on their website. And if we can fit 2 satellites in that rideshare volume, it goes to 500,000. So you're going from what once cost $1 billion to $500,000. And now we just saw the second landing of Starship. The prices that they're quoting, it would cost maybe like $1,200 to launch our satellite.
Whoa.
So that's obviously a better situation for everybody.
Yeah, it feels like it's about to be acceleration. How does it feel to be in the middle of a very interesting industry that a lot of people are kind of paying attention to because Elon Musk is shooting rockets up in the air, but all of technology is dominated by AI talk. And AI is a transformational technology. But what does it feel to be in this place where it's like doing crazy things and nobody's really thinking about it, nobody's really talking about it?
I don't really think that it matters, because if you build a great company, so like Umbra's an old company. We've been around for 9 years. We're not a startup anymore. We're profitable. So we're not valued on hype. We kind of never.
Yeah.
And so, not saying that AI is overhyped, because I don't want to piss off my friends at AI, but I think the real answer is, if you just make money and like return money to shareholders, I don't think there's really nothing matters. Just make money.
And so, but I mean, you must have something that excites you about this technology. Like what about space is kind of getting you up in the morning every day?
So I'm less interested in space generally and far more interested in business. If you want to talk about space, it's probably my co-founder who spent like 10 years at Northrop Grumman working on advanced space systems. But what attracted to me about Umbra specifically was the unit economics. Like, we have a satellite that is very inexpensive and produces extremely high quality data. And we've done some things in what's called power aperture, which allows us to take more pictures than anyone else. So as a business person, I look at the economics of that. So I have a very low unit cost robot that doesn't get tired and produces an abundance of supply. And with an abundance of supply, you can reduce prices and increase demand. You increase demand, you launch more satellites, you lower prices again. You have this really great supply demand equilibrium, which kind of only we have in the industry. And I find that to be incredibly attractive. Because at the end of the day, it is about making money. Like, I would sell Nikes if I could have the same profit margin.
And so then what was the hardest thing that you learned about business in the business of satellites, a bit about business of launching satellites that most people take for granted in business?
So I learned something hard every single day. I would not wish starting a company on my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish starting a venture business on my worst enemy. It is so difficult. I mean, when Umbra started, there was probably 100 companies, typically two founders, who went out to try and win the Earth observation business. It's now been almost a decade. Or no, it's been maybe 8 years. And no, it's probably been almost a decade. I think this is our 10th year. And out of those 100 companies, 80% failed probably. Maybe 15% SPAC'd and got totally just smoked by the market. And maybe you have 5 that remain private. As far as I can tell, we're the only company that's profitable. And when you start a company, you look at these other satellite companies, Earth observation providers, as like your heroes. Like, it's so incredible what they're doing. Like, I mean, we stood on the back of really incredible entrepreneurs who had their companies essentially fail. And I think that they failed because they fell so in love with the technology and not the economics. They also, because of the venture funding, were playing the game to win. And winning for Silicon Valley is very different than winning in business. So it's headcount, it's satellites launched, it's first to market, it's all these goofy things that if I look at them and I'm like, wait, if I was the first to launch a crummy satellite, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, if I have the largest constellation, then I have the most CapEx depreciating on orbit. If I have the highest headcount, I have the highest burn. If I'm doing AI on the data, I've just doubled my costs because I have to hire literally the most expensive engineers in the world to look at a satellite picture. So we said no to all of that. And Silicon Valley like wholeheartedly rejected us. They said, "This is dumb. What's your big story? What's the big picture?" And I would sit and I'd say, "The big picture is like 90% profit margins and a bunch of money." And they're like, "Well, that's not. We don't do that."
They used to do it. Silicon Valley used to do that.
I don't know.
Like I mean, with the chips, that used to be a business. It used to
Yeah,
be a real
like the
business.
90s. Yeah, like the 90s. But I mean, that also was super predatory. I think that there's probably a way to
Uh,
do it. And we have a diverse investor set where we do have VCs, but they look at the problem very differently. They don't look at it in terms of like IRR markups. They look at it as like, not how do I raise my next fund by getting a markup. It's how do I invest in really great businesses.
mm,
So I saw that very clear diversion between many of our competitors and us. And it also means that we have believers. So we have investors who believe in the company. We don't need them as much anymore because we're profitable, but like in the early days when we made mistakes, which we make plenty, like we're there, like when we made mistakes or we screwed things up or if we broke something on the satellite, the investors are there like, I believe, no problem. What do you need? Like, and that's a really great thing to have.
um, and so I want to ask who your investors are, if you feel comfortable sharing that. If you don't have,
Sure, happily.
yeah, yeah.
So I'll go with our first round. We had Hemisphere Ventures, which is a great fund. They invest exclusively in space, alongside of Starbridge Capital, of which now I'm an LP. It is an incredible fund. They also invest in really great real businesses. We had CrossPet Ventures in Los Angeles, and I was actually just on the phone with Brian Garrett, their GP. Brian was like they're a seed to A fund, and they essentially led our pre-seed or seed. And Brian is an engineer, but he's like, this is he saw and understood the vision as a non-space investor, and said this is incredible. And I think that by now we've almost returned their entire fund, um, which is really important to me. Maybe that's a winning thing, but I like it. We also had Josh Manchester, and
Mm.
Josh
Wow.
Manchester is like,
Yeah, he's in
if
everything.
you know Champion Health Ventures, he's
Yeah,
fucking awesome.
yeah.
He's an incredible investor. Um, but later we brought on Starcastle Ventures and what's now called Nimble Ventures, which is a venture capital firm run by John Burbank, who's a very well-known, incredible hedge fund investor. He was early in crypto. He shorted the housing crisis back in the day.
Oh, wow.
He's a big investor in AppLovin, which is now worth $100 billion. And John sits on our board and is the most wise sage I could ever ask for.
Cool.
He's like really smart, successful people. Like he's very calm. He's very collected, and he has these catchphrases which are so good. Like if we failed at something, he'd be like, "Tell me about that learning experience," not yelling at me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, um, like he's like human capital is the most valuable thing you can have. Like he's just so calm and thinks so deeply and thematically. He is really one of the best investors in the world. I love him.
So,
Same with Hal.
uh-huh.
Yes, I don't want to get upset. I love everybody. We have a great
Yeah,
campaign.
it's very interesting because those investors are not traditionally Silicon Valley investors, and it like the space investment seems really interesting. The idea that in 2015 there are investors in space, because before that, how were they professional investors in space? What was
Well, you
existing?
would like buy frickin' Boeing bonds. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
prime.
probably so. We came up with the idea in 13 or 2014. And then there, in the early days, there was some companies called with Skybox, which is now Planet Labs, and some of these early companies were launching shoebox-sized satellites when Boeing was launching a satellite the size of the school
Whoa.
bus, and those guys really paved the way. I mean, they incredible entrepreneurs.
Interesting. So it's just this nascent business. Now, what was it like in 21 and 22 when all of these guys were doing these SPACs and just the insane, low interest rates, just sort of feeding frenzy to try to, I mean, I don't even know what was going on there. Well, like, what was that like during that time period?
So we missed it, and it probably saved the company. So in 2019, so just at the beginning of 2020, we were like, we need money. And it was like I was watching the Dow just collapse 1,000 points a day or whatever it was, when no one understood. They thought that, I mean, back then people thought COVID was just going to kill everybody.
Yep.
Um, of course, we've learned a lot since then. But we raised by the summer, but we already had all the deal terms and stuff. So we missed all the hype, and we only raised $20 million. Our competitors raised probably hundreds of millions. And if you raise $100 million and you're like 27 or whatever, if you're a child, you're going to solve all of your problems with money.
Yeah.
And we never had any money. So
Yeah.
we had to solve all of our problems with technology. And because we solved all of our problems with technology way back when, now all of our problems are solved with technology when everyone wants to give us money. And we're the only profitable Earth observation company. Like, everyone wants to give us money. And now it's like, well, it's such a funny dynamic because we probably couldn't have raised it a
Yeah.
penny to that whole hype cycle. That being said, I mean, we were offered a SPAC, and the bankers, they talk to you, and it's like, you're going to be so rich, you make so much money. And we didn't do it because we really believed in this long-term vision of like, don't play the game to win, play to continue, to have an ability to continue to play, which means, don't be dependent on a third party, just an investor.
Yeah, dependencies, and there's so many. I've been thinking a lot about dependencies. I am very interested in space, but I'm not currently involved with it. I am very interested in AI, and I'm doing a lot of things in AI. And one of my big things is humanism. So, all of Western civilization is built off of this framework of humanism meets Christianity, and they merged. You have the pagan thoughts from the Greeks and the Romans, and it was rediscovered by the Christians and put into this context that created the Western rational enlightenment, created science, created all these beautiful things that allowed us to go to space. And it's this strong foundation of humanism. And it's really interesting to kind of peer into that and like a lot. I come from Silicon Valley. I was born in Silicon Valley. I left Silicon Valley to go now live in Buenos Aires because it's gotten so bad there. The lack of humanism has gotten so bad. And it relates to everything you just talked about, because we had the neocons and then the neoliberals, and essentially created this idea that humans are only unit economics. I'm a business person as well. I love learning about business. I love learning about economics, but putting the human as just a basic economic unit is a faulty philosophy. I think there's like a lot wrong there, and I think San Francisco just kind of fell into that. There's a lot of greed, and there's a lot of hype, and there's all these things that just like feels like it's somewhat turning into maybe a Detroit, although there's a lot of interesting innovation going on there. So, but I feel very conflicted about it. Now, let's go into the business of space. I did an interview with Astroforge, and that was the most far out thing I could think of trying to find, is just like space mining asteroids, like literally far out and conceptually far out. And I've also done another interview with the guys from Phase 4 about their propulsion technique, which is pretty interesting. They had a propellant agnostic engine, so they could Once they ran out of the propellant, they could dip down into the atmosphere and then refuel on nitrogen. And it's so interesting. And can you map out the business of space and kind of share what are you most optimistic on and what are you most pessimistic on in terms of the business of space?
So they're both the same answer, which is all the money is on Earth. Point at Earth. Do stuff like you need to have space things for Earth communication. Like, so look at Starlink, look at Intelsat, look at all these like communication satellites, Dish TV, Sirius XM radio. Like anything like that makes a lot of sense to me because there is an established market where people will buy a better product for less money. And I don't think 10 years from now, people are going to be like laying cables for internet.
Yep.
Like that should all come from space. Like right now, I'm talking on my Starlink. So what happens? So that's communication. Earth observation is like, okay, if I can take a picture at the same resolution as an airplane from a satellite and it costs less money, why wouldn't I do that? You also have access to areas that you wouldn't with an airplane because airplanes get shot at. But I think that the moment that you start talking about a whole nother market that needs to be established, so I see a lot of companies are like, we're going to do this, and when Starship launches, which is going to work and is going to happen, but I don't know when, they start selling commercial contracts, then the costs are going to be so low that we can have this widget in space, and this widget is going to serve some other market called the moon. And it's like, I don't know how much money, I've never been to the moon, but I don't think there's a lot of money there. Like I just know people who are spending money on shit for the moon. It's not interesting to me. But I am how do I build a business today? Look, we're old. And you know what, like if we had had this conversation 9 years ago, and I was like, there was no market for commercial radar imagery. Yeah. Talking to myself now, I would have said that's dumb. Because it's a dumb investment. There's no market for it. So I don't know much, but one thing that I do know is that I'm wrong.
And that goes back to the Roman and Greek philosophy of essentially knowing what you don't know and asking yourself what you actually know. Okay, so really interesting points. It's like we're building a sense layer looking towards the Earth, and that's the main business. I got to ask, like, what about defense? Where does defense play into this? Where is that headed? I mean, China definitely is thinking about owning space. I looked into there's something called the Artemis Accords. And the Artemis Accords is, I think it was in the 1960s and 1970s, where they're trying to develop a legal framework for how to think about space. But it does feel like it's going to become a battleground. Do you think that that's right? Do you think no or yes? Or
I mean, without saying anything too negative about China, China has looked at every single treaty and every single agreement that we have on space and essentially said, fuck you, we're going to do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And the United States has not done anything to help prevent that. And maybe the new administration changes it, but I've seen with no rules, which the Chinese have no rules. Like there is something called the telecommunications. It's TCU or whatever they do. It's a treaty that says you can use these bandwidths for remote sensing. You can use them for communication. Blah blah. The Chinese built and launched a satellite outside a band. And they will continue to do it. I've seen them rapidly improve month over month, year over year, where their first kind of radar satellite was like a drone, like a Chinese drone you'd buy at Walmart, versus us, it's like a Predator drone. And they're slowly approaching closer and closer to our capability. And unless you unlock American ingenuity and remove all the regulations on what we can build, the Chinese have a greenfield. Like we launched our first satellite without a license. We were not allowed to transmit from the satellite.
Wow.
Thankfully, we were able to get a license, but that's not. I don't know how much I would probably spend millions of dollars dealing with regulations
Yeah.
and all this nonsense when the government is our customer. We love the United States government. We started. Look, I have a come and take it flag on my wall. Like this is like we're probably the most. We are absolutely the company that you want to give contracts to for America, right?
Mm.
And I'm
It was a
I'm
nightmare.
very concerned. Yeah, I'm very concerned. But
Um,
yeah, defense is a huge part. Like even so, yeah, we have a lot of we'll call it missions in the defense space, but our satellite is able to see through clouds, able to see through smoke. In the recent wildfires in Los Angeles,
mm,
we're essentially the only people with data, and we put the data on the internet for free because we have an abundance of supply. It was picked up by Soar Earth, the New York Times, by everybody to help build those fire maps. And I've spent the last week doing one-on-one phone calls showing them people's satellite imagery of their houses and their neighborhoods.
whoa. Um, and that makes it practical. The like what you can do with satellites specifically to help something in on the Earth. Um, okay, so we got defense, we got the business. Oh man, there was a great question I had. Mm,
You can cut it. We can cut this quiet space.
yeah. Uh, oh man. Okay, so you got each satellite weighs 70 kilograms. You got a constellation up there. Do you have any thoughts on the Kessler syndrome? The idea that if the space trash, like, is that an issue, or is that just something that fantasy people make up, like the AI stuff?
So the answer to that is I'm asked this all the time. And the answer is there's a lot of area in space. It is very, very, very big. I think there's maybe, oh, I don't want to quote it wrong, but call it on or about 10,000 large objects circling Earth. And I was with one of the FCC commissioners, I won't say who, and he's like, "Are you worried about a boat being hit by another boat?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Okay, why would you be worried about? There's far more boats on Earth than there are satellites in space.
Yeah.
Space is far larger than the ocean. Why are you not worried about boats just randomly colliding with themselves?" And the other thing is there's gravity in space. So space debris does fall to Earth. You have to do an orbital debris removal plan as part of your license to launch a satellite in the United States. I don't know what they do in China.
Mm.
But we cannot launch an object into space that lasts longer than 25 years. It has to burn up. So there are real risk mitigation. Also, you know all the big antennas you see in the desert, like in the movies, that are like these radio telescopes?
Yeah.
They're tracking objects the size of a ball bearing or something the size of a screw. And so if we're going to hit something, we get a phone call or we get a message that says, "Hey, in 2 weeks, you might hit this object. Why don't you move?" Like, and if you move like 1 kilometer over time, that the orbits, it's just your distance gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
But how much control do we have on all those satellites in space? Like, how much direct control is it? I mean, I imagine from what you just said that on the American side we got a bunch, but on the Chinese side it might also just be total anarchy, and it
Yeah,
could
but
also.
we avoid their shit. We avoid all
Oh,
the
got it.
goofy stuff.
Yeah.
So like America's fine, but I'll put it this way: the amount of control that we have on our satellites is incredible. Like we fly two satellites or we fly multiple pairs of satellites in formation,
Mm.
where they are flying right next to each. So our satellites are falling down to Earth at 20,000 miles an hour. We have to send down a radio signal to Earth, bounce it off Earth, and measure the distance between Earth and our satellite while we're falling, while we're orbiting. So we're orbiting Earth like this, extremely fast as Earth is spinning. We're able to keep two satellites in perfect geometry where they're flying like this through space so they can image the same target at the same time with
Get it
like
back up.
very,
Get it
very
back
little
up.
distance.
Why do they do
Wow.
it at the same time? Why two at the same time?
So if I take a image of an object from two different angles, I get essentially double the data,
Mm.
and you can learn so much more. It's very, very useful.
In terms of the business, what wouldn't somebody like me or somebody listening to the show, wouldn't they understand about the importance of data? And I imagine it's all computer vision, or it's all vision, it's all sense based. Like, what am I missing from my understanding of data that's being out there around the earth? What's the most interesting thing around the data that we're collecting?
I think that the main thing is it's how can you be practical with the data?
Mm.
So I gave you the example of firefighters. I mean, I was talking to a hedge fund manager this morning. It's like, I really need to understand these parking lots. I was like, what parking lots? It's like, oh, before I blow up his screen. When is this being released? So, okay, so there's call it RV parks. So you have RV parks that have all these RVs in them. So if I'm manufacturing RVs, I'm placing them in the parking lots next to the manufacturing facility. So we're using the satellites to image those parking lots to see how full they are. And based on how full the lots are, we know exactly how many RVs were sold. And based on that, because you have the data before earnings, and you can go and trade based on
Yeah.
the
Okay.
sales of the
Yeah.
sale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But I mean, I have crypto. I don't know. Bitcoin's like probably at 105,000 right now. I got a phone call, and the guy's like, "Hey, I'm looking at this crypto mine. Can you tell me what's happening there? I need to understand the catenary and the telephone lines." I was like, "What?" He's like, "So the telephone line is bending like this.
Yeah.
I can tell if there's power, not the power line. I can tell if there's power running through it. And then using your data, I can look at the fans on top of the server room to determine how cold it is inside of the server room. And based on that, I can see what kind of like ridiculous coin is being mined."
And so there's a couple of different questions for that. First, do you think it's sort of an autistic curiosity that motivates most
No,
of
no, no,
that
no,
data
no, no, no,
seeking?
no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. We're on a Zoom like this.
Yeah.
We had a watch on. It was like it was probably a $500,000 watch. I was
Yeah.
like, what the, how much money are you making doing this? He's like,
Yeah.
we made $50 million last year.
Yeah. But that doesn't discount the idea that it could just be autistic curiosity that drives him to find these little habits of these little like niches of value. Like it could be both. It could be I want to make money and also I want to go autistically train my brain in this way.
I'm all about autism maxing. Even better if you can make money doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can go like I got a guy. This dude loves beet farming, like beet, like the beets that you eat. He loves beet farming more than anything. And he's like, "Can you start taking images of these beet farms?" I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Beets are a commodity.
Yeah.
Like you can actually trade on the value of beets, and based on your data, I can tell what the production of beets are going to be." And that goes anywhere from like rail, where it's like the bowing of if it gets really hot, a train track will bow, and it's really dangerous. You create a derailment. So they have an API that tells them what the heat is, and then they either send a guy with a truck and a clipboard to go double check, or a drone. But we can get them large areas very quickly, like within. In some cases, we've demonstrated in taking a picture, tasking and delivering a picture within 5 minutes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, this is changing my mind on a lot of different things about what it means to be an investor and alpha and how to find alpha. uh, there's so many different ways we can go. What motivates you to do this business? Like you said, make money. Are you a philosophically inclined at all?
Yeah, I mean, I just told you I'm not playing a game to win. I'm playing an infinite game.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah.
You have to be. So like when the company becomes so highly, like when the valuation goes up,
Yeah.
when you have like a lot of employees, you're not like I used to take out the trash, in the office. I don't do that anymore. So you have to start thinking where philosophy becomes strategic, which is like how do you treat people? How do you treat your investors? How do you treat your customers? What are those philosophies? How do you implement kindness, which in many cases can be mean, inside of your organization? And you have to be a philosopher.
This is a large part of crazy wisdom is just there's such a direct connection between and I've never gotten this point before, which is that where philosophy becomes strategic, right? Because there's a lot of philosophy that's not very practical. Although I find it really funny now that with the AI stuff, there are a lot of questions that were very impractical questions about the nature of being a human being, which are now becoming computer science questions. For example, programming an agent to have a will to go do something. Like, what does it mean to have reasoning and will? Those are now computer science questions. They've been computer science questions for a long time, but they haven't been practical computer science questions. And philosophy becoming strategic. So who have you read or contended with throughout history to understand strategy and philosophy?
So last year, so in 24, I made a commitment to myself to listen to or read a book a week. It's the hardest thing I've ever done because you don't have any time, right? Like, there's no time.
Yeah.
And I feel that bringing all this knowledge from all these great authors, and this is anything from, I read a parenting book called Good Inside, which is essentially what it says to you, like, it has helped me far more in my business relationships than any other relationship I've had. And as an example, we had an investor who was like, when are we going to IPO? When are we going to IPO? Like, I'm like, we're not IPO. What are you talking about? Like, we just launched a satellite, which we're like finally profitable. No one understands what a black and white picture is. We're not IPOing tomorrow. And normally what you would do is have like a conflict. And I kind of stopped, and my co-founder makes fun of me. He's like, "Where's the old Gabe? All you do is like talk about philosophy all the time, and you don't yell at anybody anymore." And so I stopped and was like, "What problem are you trying to solve?" Like, I've got 3 kids in college. I got country club memberships gone up, like whatever. And I'm like, "What do you like? So you need how much money do you need?" It's like $2 million. Like, okay, what other companies do you own? Like, do you think that one of those companies do a secondary? Like, do you think that Umbra will do a secondary? If it's like reasonable, maybe I'll buy the stock. And you avoid this huge conflict, which is forcing a company to IPO so some investor can get $2 million. It doesn't make any sense at all. And practicing extreme empathy for people you're in conflict with has been very, very fruitful. Also, like, so the premise of the book is children don't get to make any decisions, right? So they are always very frustrated. It's like, I want to jump off the thing at the park, or I want to roll around the leaves. You're like, well, you have allergies, or you could get hurt, or whatever it is. And so they're hearing no all the time. So it's how do you allow them to make decisions which are safe? And for investors, there's a lot of correlation.
Yeah.
If you get we've raised $170 million. We have 1 preferred board member. They're not really able to make decisions about the company unless it negatively would impact their stock. That's a really scary place to be in. And so that means you need to listen to and understand your investors very, very deeply, or you're going to have horrible conflict with them. So I also just recently read Marcus Aurelius' book,
Mm.
Meditations. Um, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Um,
What's the
but
biggest thing that what's the biggest takeaway?
it is not reacting emotion. Like if I like to say, like, if your reaction to something is above a 6, it's probably not the thing.
Mm.
So it's like, okay,
Mm.
you didn't put the cap on the toothpaste, you motherfucker. I'm so mad at you, blah, blah, blah. It's probably not about the
Yeah,
toothpaste.
yeah,
It's probably about something else. So, you know, it's so important to step back. It's so important to listen. It's so important to learn from people in your life. But it's very hard to do as a human. So we're reactionary. Like we're a caveman at the end of the day.
yeah.
And I'm still a caveman. I yelled at somebody today.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the I call it the angel animal distinction. It's just like we got an angel inside and we got an animal, and who knows which one's going to come out today.
It's the same thing with investors. There's angels and there's devils.
Yeah, yeah, the angel investors. I mean, I would love to go into that. How like I grew up. My father's an investor. I think he's a good investor. He taught me a lot about investment. He teaches me a lot about investment. But I just generally from meeting all the other investors in Silicon Valley over the past 15 years, it's like I don't want to involve myself with investors unless it's. I mean, there's the venture capital. Like if I do have something that I want to go to $1 billion, that it feels like that's the right thing, then I get it. But more and more, I move towards sovereignty, sovereignty. And actually, one of my previous bosses at my last company, who I think you, if you don't already know him, would be a good person for you to meet. He calls it the sovereignty game. They also started in 2015 as a business process outsourcing company. Started in 2015 and basically had a slog for a long time until they got into OpenAI in 21 and basically blew up. But he had, before all that had happened, he had gone back to all his investors and bought back all the shares and basically really figured out how to do business. And the sovereignty game is something that I'd rather play, and he counter positions it against the venture game, which is just like go really, really big, spend as much money as possible, like you said, get to 1, 2, or 3, preferably 1, and then 100x so that you can pay off all your investors the multiple that they need. What do you think about, like, if you were to talk to somebody who is skeptical about raising money, how would you do due diligence on the investors to make sure that it is a good fit before going into it?
So I think the answer is yeah. I mean, Umbra is an old company. I mean, we first came up with the idea and kind of built the company before we filed the LLC in 2015. It's like the investor ecosystem did not exist the same way it does now.
Yeah.
It was like a lot, like you asked, like how do you invest in space in like 24? Like that's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that ecosystem is good, and it is good to take bets and to lose money and all that. It's all part of the kind of investor game.
Mm.
But the advice that I get, and I'm asked often for advice about starting a company, I always say don't do it because it's not fun. It's not worth it. It isn't. Like look at the example I gave before.
Yeah.
You have 100 companies in the Earth observation business, and one makes money, and you know, and we're the one that no one bet on, and the actual like human effect of that, those 80 companies that failed, they have two founders, right?
Yeah.
So you have 160 people who are kind of lost, and that's just such a terrible place to be in. So I always ask, what kind of company do you want to
Mm.
build?
Mm.
Do you want to build a startup that gets overhyped and has big marks, and you go and do a secondary and you make 10 million bucks, but the company does wind up failing? or do you want to build a really, really great business?
Mm.
And if you build a really, really great business that's going to last
Mm.
decades or centuries, you have to build a
Mm.
very different business than a business that's overly hyped. And I have this conversation because it's both are attractive. Like kind of like pumping up the value of a stock and getting $10 million, is great. But at the end of the day, all you have is your reputation. And like, because if you try really hard on a legitimate business and fail, your investors will still respect you. They will still like you.
Yeah.
But if you grift and you're like, oh, we're gonna do this whole thing and it's gonna be so big, and it just never happens, and it was all so ridiculous, you'll never get money again.
Mm.
No one will work with you.
Mm.
And that's the other thing is the investor community is small, right?
Yeah.
It's very small. Um, I am, if there's another company in Earth observation, I probably, and they're like, whatever, go through YC or whatever it is, I will receive 25 to 50 texts
Wow.
about them.
Yeah, because everyone's doing due diligence in the background.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. So there's like no red flags that you get. Like I've asked myself this question many times, and it's like I always come down to just spend as much time as possible with them over a long period of time before doing business, before taking the investment. But oftentimes that's like not even possible, right? Because a lot of investors, like you're talking to 100 investors to raise money, like you can only meet with so many of them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I do. So there's a way that you do it, which is, oh, I'm gonna kind of let out a secret here, but it's okay, I'll get yelled at. So if you go to the big firms, everyone asks the big firms, what do you think about X company?
Uh-huh.
So if you start with the big firm and they reject you,
Oh yeah.
then you go to a little firm and the little firm diligences you by going to the big firm. And then the big firm goes, oh, I talked to the founder, I don't really get it. And then they say no. So the way to actually properly raise money is to start small. So what you do is you talk to angels, like wealthy individuals in your space who understand what the F you're doing,
Mm.
which is if you're doing something like a satellite, there's very few of them. Then you go to like small, tiny funds, sub $10 million, be like, hey, I want a $500,000 check. I already have these angels involved. They have all this expertise. They believe in me. And if you're going to diligence anybody, diligence these people who've already committed to invest.
Mm.
And then you go to the mid-sized funds and you'll almost certainly fill up your round.
Mm.
And then after you have all the money raised in like principal, without wires, you go to the big boys. And then the big boys go, oh, fuck, this is great. And then maybe they'll preempt the round or they'll give you a higher valuation, whatever. But you got to go to them last.
Mm.
Because if you go to them first, you could totally kill your round.
Yeah. It's well. This goes back to, this will be the last question. It's sort of like the narrative. There's business, then there's the narrative about businesses, and they're complexly related together in ways that intuitively don't make as much sense unless you've been into it. And so how do you navigate these two pieces of the business where there is this hype factor, and the hype factor like does wind its way into the investment community? It also winds its way into maybe the customers and all these different things. How do you navigate this deeply philosophical understanding of narrative versus real practical business?
Well, I think the answer is credibility, right?
Mm.
So the path that I explained to you is like you get probably the deepest, most credible people are individuals in your space,
Yeah,
who don't have any money.
yeah,
And then you build that credibility. You also, raising money is very hard. It's um, very taxing and very hard psychologically,
yeah,
because you get rejected so much.
yeah.
Fortunately, I'm used to being rejected. Not very good at sports. Um, So, or school or anything. So
Yeah.
like I'm very used to getting rejected, so it didn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
But I think that for really smart founders who like go to great schools and have had
Mm-hmm.
a really an easier path in life, um, that rejection is very difficult. So the idea is that you go through that rejection process, but once you have angels and you have individuals who support what you're doing, you gain confidence. And it's like this really smart person who should be, and is a mentor to me, believes in me. And I had, we had my mentor invests in a company. Um,
Mm.
he's at like, he made so much money just because he believed in me. And, my background wasn't space, but he believed in me.
Yeah.
And you bring that confidence into all your future meetings.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So it's about
it's
building
just gotta build
confidence.
confidence.
Yeah, which is in general a good life skill is to build confidence in general. That's really
You
cool.
gotta earn it. It just sucks. It's hard. Like actually earning it is very, very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually earning confidence rather than being born into it. Um, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you? More about Umbra?
I am at sign Dominocello on Twitter, LinkedIn. I don't use Facebook. I'm on Instagram too. Um, and then it's umbraspace.com. If and we're doing this really cool thing. So a satellite image is like super expensive.
Yeah.
Like I think we charge like $500 or $600 for a half meter image, maybe 1 meter image.
Huh.
But
Whoa.
like $3,000 for a quarter-meter image, and then if you want something really spicy, it's like tens of thousands.
Whoa.
If you tweet us, we will take a satellite image for you and post it.
Oh, great. Oh, so I could just go
So
on. Oh, that's great.
yeah, so there's a form on Umbra. It's at Umbra Space on Twitter. You just fill out the form, and we'll take a satellite image for you. It's fun.
Okay. Definitely doing that. And maybe we
So
should
I
get.
would do that. We also have an open data archive. Yeah.
You have a what?
Yeah, put the link in the show notes. We also
Yeah.
have a open data archive, which is like
Oh.
probably the equivalent of $50 million in one of our competitors' data,
Cool.
which is great to train models on or whatever it is. What we want to do is get you access to the data because high resolution data from space never really existed publicly before. So making sure people can use it and train on it is really important to us.
Whoa. That's awesome. Okay, very cool. I'll go gotta figure out where. I got a treasure hunt. Did you hear about the treasure hunt? There was recently a treasure hunt. They used satellite imagery to help people find treasure. Basically, it was a treasure hunt through satellite imaging. I'm about to do a treasure hunt here in Buenos Aires. But
Let's do it right now. Do I get
yeah,
treasure? Well, let's
yeah,
pass this satellite. I want
yeah.
treasure.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. Buenos Aires. Do you have any good? Do you have any good image of
Probably.
Buenos Aires?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, we have, yeah, all we see on average any point on Earth twice daily per bird. And we've launched 10 satellites. We have pretty
Okay.
frequent access. That's closer to the equator, so it's worse, but
That's really
poles we
interesting.
get 16 times a day per unit.
Okay, I have to think through this because this could be very interesting for the treasure hunt.
Let's have fun. We can have fun. Also, you can use SkyFi,
Okay.
which is like SkyFi uses all kinds of data, and they let you freaking task a satellite or like launch a balloon with their app, and it's really really cost competitive. Like they don't upsell above our price, so we actually give them a discount, and then they arbitrage it. But
Oh, whoa.
yeah, so it's you can buy the same data from them. I'll just make less money, which is fine. Their user interface and everything is so much easier.
And so I should have gotten this earlier, but you essentially have this system where anybody can go in and pay you guys money to go find things on the earth.
Oh, it's buy by the drink. You go in. We have a very similar user interface to Uber. So if you think about Uber, it's like the car is this far away. I want it to go here. And so we give you kind of a timeline when the satellite's going to be over your location, takes a picture, and then drops down. And we have all the instances, because there's a lot of satellites, we have all the instances in which you can get it. Also, so you think about Earth as a globe, right?
Yeah.
It's not flat,
Yeah.
despite what many believe. So at the right angle, you can look inside of things. So if like there's an airplane like hangar that you want to look inside of and the hangar doors open, you can, because it's round, you just have the appropriate angle and you image inside of the hangar.
How do I connect it to a treasure hunt? Because I guess the treasure, I'll find a spot and then I'll put treasure in it, and then the clues will lead to the satellite image. Maybe there's an online, offline. The whole treasure hunt idea is actually really exciting for me personally, because as we were talking about the humanism, we have this here in Buenos Aires. There's a perfect kind of mixture of humanism that's from here. And so I want, as AI starts to build more dependencies, as people start to build more dependencies on AI for either like relationships or just all the other dependencies that are come from AI, what I want to do is bring people together and put them on treasure hunts without their phones, and do everything by paper, and then go and talk to strangers in order to learn Spanish. And then the Spanish leads to the treasure.
So, okay, so here's the question. Is that a venture business, or is that just a regular business?
No, this feels like a lifestyle business. Well, so this initial part is the lifestyle business, but there is also, I have the one where I help people remove their dependencies on AI, but then I have the other Pokemon Go style AI enabled language learning treasure business that could be venture funded, but I want to do the in-person thing first, basically.
Yeah, so that's in my conversation you asked, is like, what kind of business do you want to build? And the answer is like, if you have a business that you own 100% of and it makes $1 million a year, you're making $1 million a year. Like you're like so my house in Austin is in a very nice neighborhood, and my next door neighbor owns a chain of taco places. Like he probably makes like he makes a lot of money. Like he doesn't have any investors or anything. And like he is so much richer than me in terms of his time, with his family, with everything, that like I don't know that you would really want my life compared to that.
Yeah. Because of the demands on your time, basically. And
the demands on my time, my money is illiquid, right? I can't just like, my stock isn't publicly traded. Like it's a pretty good life. Making $1 million is a great life. You have all the same cool cars and all the like whatever, like, and you have no obligation. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'll reach out about the treasure hunt once I nail down the sequence of events.
Please do. I'd love it.
Yeah.
I love weird stuff. Come on, I'm a philosopher. This is great.
Thank you, sir.